Well, what a great honor this is to be here. I always describe Peter Drucker, he forgot more than most of us ever knew about management and leadership. You know, my mother used to say, why don't you write a book by yourself? And I've only written 2 books by myself, one on golf. So many people helped my golf game, I didn't know who to write it with. And a book on my spiritual journey. But Peter wrote 35 books by himself. And so I ran out of material pretty early. So it's just such an honor because he's such a guru in our field and a great human being. So to be part of this centennial and to spend some time with Warren Bennis and Charles Handy tomorrow, what a thrill. I just, be happy to, carry the water bucket for those guys. So I really enjoy being here. Let me just share with you what I'm spending most of my time now is trying to help people lead at a higher level. And we define leading at a higher level as helping people accomplish worthwhile goals while taking into consideration the needs and concerns of all involved. Making money is not a worthwhile goal. It is a byproduct of doing good things. And so when we talk about leading at a higher level, we're really talking about, in many ways, a triple, a quadruple bottom line, which I wish Wall Street would adopt, which is that profit is the applause you get for taking care of your customers, treating your people well, and being a good citizen in your environment. And you want to be a provider of choice, you want to be an employer of choice, you want to be a citizen of choice, and sure, you want to be the investment of choice too. I was reading, I was telling a group earlier, a wonderful quote from the Dalai Lama recently, and he said that businesses are complex organizations. They are not money-making machines. And he said that sure, making money is important so that organizations can what? Do good things. But he said human beings can't survive if they don't have food or water. But to define us as, just, gatherers of food and water and all really misses the point. We need food and water so we can do good things and make a difference in life. And I think that's what's really true. So what I want to talk to you about is if you're going to lead at a higher level, what would that mean in this tough economic times? And I'm suggesting to people that there's 3 things we need to focus on in tough economic times if we're going to lead at a higher level. The first one is, as leaders, we need to be bearers of hope. If you're not hopeful, then your people are in big trouble. It doesn't mean you should deny the truth about the present reality, but what you really need to do is to say, we can make this through this. We've done this in the past. We're very fortunate, Margie and I have a 94-year-old entrepreneur on our board of directors. And he said, come on, I went through the Depression, 29. He said, they didn't have any systems or anything. He said, this is tough, but that was really tough. So Pat has been just a wonderful perspective setter for us. And so that you really need to be bearers of hope and say, we can do this. Let's hang together. This is tough, but we can make it. And to show you the power of being hopeful, why don't you all stand up? I want to do a couple of things. First, what I want you to do is, within the limits of where you are sitting, I'd like you to take about 30 seconds and greet as many people as you possibly can, but greet them in a special way. Greet them as if they're unimportant and you're looking for somebody much more important to talk to. So if you could, okay. Okay, stop where you are, but don't sit down. Stop where you are, but don't sit down. What I'd like you to do now is, for another 30 seconds, greet as many people as possible. At this time, greet them as if they're a long-lost friend and you are really glad to see them. Okay, you can sit down. You can sit down. You can sit down. When I'm not in California, I always say to people, why do you think I did that, besides I'm from California, and we're going to bring in some hot tubs a little bit later. But the reason I did that is that if you want to run a great organization, great family, great church and all, you have to know how to manage people's energy, including your own. Which of the two activities was there more energy in the room, the first one or the second one? Second one, significant. And what did I do to change the whole energy? All I changed was what you were thinking about. From a negative thought, these are unimportant people, to a positive thought, these are long-lost people. And all of a sudden, the energy in the room changed, see? And it's really interesting. I don't know how many of you know that the brain and the computer have a lot in common. You know what they have in common? Both the brain and the computer do not know the difference between the truth and what you tell it. When you put information in a computer, it doesn't say these facts are wrong, where'd you get these facts? The computer will do whatever it can with the input you give it. What have we said about the computer for years? Garbage in, what? Garbage out. You know the brain is the exact same way? Your brain doesn't know the difference between the truth and what you tell it. If you woke up this morning, looked in the mirror and said, you were fabulous, your brain is going to say, who are you kidding? You know, I know you a lot better than that. And so one of the things that's just amazing is the power of what? Being a positive force and being a thing of hope and helping program people's minds in a positive way. I'm not talking about in a negative way. And what's so interesting is that when you start to be hopeful and send positive messages to people, what happens to their behavior? I didn't tell you how to behave, did I? But how did you behave when I said these are unimportant people? Very little eye contact, shoulders down, very little touching past by each other. And then I said these are long-lost friends. What happened? Your faces lit up, you started to laugh, you started to hug each other. I didn't tell you what to do. But just changing your energy by what I put in your brain changed the whole behavior in the room and changed the energy. And so I can't say enough about that. I started a golf school a number of years ago. I'm a golf nut. And it was so funny. You know, I'm not a teacher of golf, but I worked on the mental part of golf, which is such an amazing game because golf is so much like life because you get good breaks you don't deserve. You get bad breaks you don't deserve. You get good breaks you do deserve. You get bad breaks you do deserve. Sometimes you're playing better than you should and you got to deal with success. Sometimes you're playing worse and you got to deal with failure. All in 4.5 hours. And that stupid ball is just sitting there and nobody else can deal with it but you. So it's really kind of fascinating. But we would have people come to our golf school and say, oh, I'm terrible out of sand traps. And we'd say, you can't hit out of the sand, can you? They said, how do you know? Well, you said you couldn't. You know, I mean, how are you going to do more than you think? And so we used to say to them when they got in the sand, I love the sand. I'm one of the greatest sand players on the West Coast. You know, I mean, the mind doesn't know. You've got to be kidding me. So we first had them be really positive, and then we had them walk like they knew what they're doing. Because your physiology, which you all did, should follow your beliefs. Okay? And so we'd have them walk into the trap. Hey, let me in there, baby. Man, I'm one of the best, you know. And then, of course, we teach them some skills, and it was amazing how they could get the ball out of the sand trap. Because they started to think that they could do it and walk like they could do it, and then they could take the things. But you get people say, I can't do it. No. You can give them the best teaching in the world. They're not going to do anything. And so the first thing I want to really emphasize with you, in all your interactions and all, you got to be a bearer of hope. If you got a bunch of neighbors around you, dump them. Get rid of them. You don't need them in your life. I mean, I don't even look at the newspaper anymore, except the sports section or the news. A book with Norman Vincent Peale, the old positive thinking minister. He was 86 years old when I met him, and I loved what he said. I said to him one day, Norman, why doesn't the news publish more good news? He said, I'm so glad they don't. He said, if good news was news, there wouldn't be much of it going on. He said, the only reason bad news is bad is not much of it happening. When you really think about business, you think, listen to the local news. There's a fire, a couple of rapes, maybe a murder, and all that, but millions of people got home and nobody says anything about it, and they even take care of their families. You know, and so what we got to do is, I was on TV recently, they said, what do you think of this economic downturn? I said, you finally accomplished your goals. You've been programming our minds for so long, and why don't you get off of it? And so what we need to be is bearer of hopes. The second thing is that you've got to look at your people as your business partners. I've seen so many organizations, tough times, they get behind closed doors, the top manager, figuring what are we going to do, and all. Everybody's sitting out there trying to wait, wonder what they're going to do. That's the stupidest thing in the world. Because your people know all kinds of things that you don't know. You've got to invite them as your business partner. You know, we had our greatest year last year. Our company, we got 320 folks working for us. We have an office in Toronto, London, and Singapore, and partners in 30 nations. And we had the greatest year in the history of our company, 30 years last year. But you could see it starting heading down in November and December. January, it hit the toilet and all. And it really could see that the data that we're going to be down 20% or more and all that kind of thing. And we had a 30-year anniversary planned. And so it was supposed to be a 2-day celebration. We took one of the days and we brought in the Wildworks group that has worked here at the Drucker Center. And with 350 people, we brought people into small groups and brainstorming ways to cut costs, ways to increase revenues, all kinds of things and all. Why? Because they got so much data. They know what's ongoing out there. You know, one of the things you got to get is that none of us is as smart as all of us. And somehow people think in organizations that all the brains are at the top of the organization. That's crazy. You got some of the smartest people in the world that can really help you there. I was last summer, the summer before, I was with Southwest Airlines when the gas price was a real problem in the airline industry. This was before the economy hit the skids. And here's Gary Kelly, the new CEO and president, took over from Colleen Barrett, and Herb Keller is both still involved, saying to people, we need your help. You know, what can we do to increase revenues? What can we do to cut costs? And it was from one of their employees that they came up with this whole thing where you can call ahead to Southwest Airlines and get, you know, a privileged thing for $35 or something. You can get in the front of the line, you know, because normally they don't have any first-class seating and all, but you at least can get in front of the line. That has brought millions of dollars into them just by people paying $35 or $40 a little extra to get in line. One of their people in working as a mechanic said, why don't we eliminate uniforms? You know, that's costing us a lot of money, you know. And they go, whoa, you know, let's really take a look at that. And the point I want to make is that your people know a lot about what's happening out there. And you need to involve them as your business partner. Stop turning your back on them and thinking that all the brains are in the top of the organization. And it's so interesting. People have asked me, how do you build trust in an organization in tough times? It starts with respect. And my friend Ichak Adisis, who taught at UCLA for years, has a wonderful concept about the difference between trust and respect. It's a nonverbal thing. So, you know, if I respect Margie, I face her because I want her opinion. If I don't respect her, I turn my back on her because I could care less about what she thinks. If she trusts me, she's willing to turn her back on me because she knows I don't mean her any harm. If she doesn't trust me, she watches me like a hawk. And see, one of the things is if you will face your people and bring them into the decision-making and share data with them in terms of, boy, in our meeting at the end of February, we shared everything with our people. We do it every quarter, including our bank loans. Where are we there? What kind of money can we borrow? And all that. A lot of people say, well, I've never been in a company that did like that. Well, we need your help. You've got to have the information. I was working with a president who owned a bunch of restaurants one time. And I was trying to say, is you got to have your people as your business partner. And he was running around like this with the balance sheet and all this kind of stuff. So one night we went into his biggest restaurant about 10 at night when they were kind of cleaning up and everybody had pretty well left. And we got everybody into the dining room. We had dishwashers, pot washers, chefs, receptionists, you know, bus boys, you know, everybody. We got them into round tables of about 6, and we said, at your table, why don't you all talk and come out and share with us at the end of the discussion of every sales dollar that comes into this restaurant, what do you think falls to the bottom line in terms of profit that can be returned to the owners or reinvested in the business? You know the least that was guessed at any table? 40 cents. 2 tables guessed 70%. You know what the profit margin in a restaurant is? Any restaurant people here? If you can keep 5 cents, you're excited. 10 cents, you know, you're in ecstasy. And what blew the president's mind is the head chef said, let me see if I get this right. If we buy a steak for $6 and we sell it for $20 and our profit margin then is $1 and I burn a steak, we have to sell 6 steaks for no profit to make up for my wastage. He already had the thing figured out. But if people think you're making 40, 70 cents a dollar, do you think they care about food costs, labor costs, any other kinds of things? You got to involve your people because their jobs depend on you staying profitable and all, but they got to at least know what the deal is. And so I can't tell you enough, in good and bad times, you got to look at your people as your business partners. The third thing that I think is really key is that you got to be servant leaders. And when I talk about servant leadership, a lot of people think I'm talking about the inmates running the prison or trying to please everybody or some kind of religious movement. They don't really understand leadership. See, there's 2 parts of servant leadership. One is strategic leadership, which is all about vision and direction. And the other is about operational leadership, which is all about implementation. Okay? The strategic leadership, which just says, what business are we in? What's the picture of the future? What are our values? What are our goals? What are the initiatives that we're going to focus on this year? That's the leadership part of servant leadership. And that's very important because if people don't know where you're going, your leadership doesn't matter. I mean, Alice learned that in Alice in Wonderland. Remember when she came to the fork in the road and didn't know what to do, and the fool Cheshire Cat's sitting there and says, which road should I take? And he said, where are you going? She said, I don't know. He said, it doesn't matter. And so I want to tell you, if you don't do strategic leadership right, your leadership doesn't matter. But now the second part of servant leadership is operational leadership or implementation, which is, now how do we take the strategy, the vision, the values, the direction, initiative, and accomplish them and live according to them? And now what you got to do is that the strategic part, the leadership part of servant leadership, that's the responsibility of the traditional hierarchy. It doesn't mean that you don't involve other people, but people look to the hierarchy for direction and vision and where are we going and all these kinds of things. And so that's their responsibility. And then you want, once you've done that, you want people to join your organization who will be responsive to the strategy, to the vision and the direction that you've set. Now, when it comes to operational leadership or implementation, now the traditional hierarchy doesn't work. What you have to do is philosophically turn it upside down so that now the leaders at the top who set the vision and direction and the strategy and all, they're at the bottom as head cheerleaders, supporters, encouragers. And who's at the top? The people closest to the customers. And this is the most tough thing for most organizations. And the reason why they don't get much help from their customers or their people is they got big egos at the top of the organization. And they want to keep the hierarchy alive and well for implementation, see? You want to make sure you know who's in charge and who's this and all. And so what happens is you have all the energy in the organization sucking up the hierarchy. If there's a conflict between a customer need and what your boss wants you to do, who wins? The boss. You're no idiot because they're evaluating you, so you better suck up the hierarchy. And what happens is that the customers now are left there in the middle of a duck pond. Wayne Dyer, the great personal growth guy, years ago said there's 2 kinds of people in life. There are ducks and there are eagles. And what do ducks do? They go quack, 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 quack. And what do the eagles do? They soar above the crowd. Okay, you can always tell an organization run by self-serving leaders because the hierarchy is alive and well, because if you got a problem with the customer, they go quack, quack, it's our policy. Quack, quack, I just work here. Quack, quack, I didn't make the freaking rules. Quack, quack, do you want to talk to my supervisor? quack, 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 quack. And that's what they're doing. They're just quacking away at you. And that's a real problem, where you can always tell when the organization's turned upside down, because what are you doing? You're dealing with eagles who can soar above the crowd. They'll say, don't worry, I'll get back to you. I'll take care of it and all. They can bring their brains to work. Just to show you a couple of fun examples of this, when I travel, I have this thing I put around my neck. I call it my geezer pouch, you know. As you get older, you forget things. And in my geezer pouch, I have my passport, and I have my license, and my ticket, and my itinerary, and a pen and pencil, and I go around the airport, you know, and all that, you know, and I got everything here. So one day I loaded my geezer pouch, and I left it on my desk, see. And I'm pulling into the airport in San Diego, and I got no official identification. And I got to get on this plane. I don't have time to go back home. Fortunately, the first airlines I went to was Southwest Airlines. Now, the only book I've ever written that I got my picture on the front cover is I wrote one with Don Shula, the old Miami Dolphins coach. You know, they took our picture in Miami Stadium. So I ran into the bookstore at the airport, and luckily they had a copy, and I bought it, see. So this young guy from Southwest Airlines is checking my bag, and he said, could I see your identification? I said, I feel badly. I don't have a license. I don't have a passport. But how's this? And I held the book up, and the guy looked at it, and he shouts out, this man knows Don Shula. He said, put him in first class. I mean, they don't have first class, but they're high-fiving me out in the street. Hey, man, that guy knows Shula, you know, and all this kind of thing, you know. And there's an older guy there, and he says, I know the security guard's upstairs. I think I can get you through there, which he did. Now, why is that so? Because that's the way Colleen Barrett, you know, Herb Kelleher, and now Gary Kelly have set the organization up. They what? They give power to the frontline people. If you've ever been in Southwest, they're having fun. Why? Because one of their values is a fun-loving attitude. And if a patient complains about that, like somebody wrote, you know, Colleen a while back and said, you know, I'm offended by the humor and the kidding that goes on around talking about safety rules on your plane. Normal airlines would write back and say, I so appreciate your note, and I'll talk to our frontline people, and here's a couple of, you know, coupons to fly and all. You know, Colleen wrote back and said, goodbye, you know, I guess you're not going to be flying with us anymore, you know, because that's their culture, and they put the power there, and they want to have fun there, and so that's what you can expect there, because they can make those kind of decisions on there. The next airline I had to go to was one of the ones that's always in financial trouble, talking about Chapter 11 and all. And I showed my book. This is before they could overnight my license to me. And, man, the duck doo-doo started to fly. I mean, oh, quack, you better go to the ticket counter. Quack, you know, you better talk to my supervisor. We call the supervisory duck the head mallard, you know, because they just quack at a higher level. Have you ever had some of them? And I tell you, within about 10 minutes, I'm talking to a guy in a suit and a tie. And I said, could you get a life, you know? I mean, you really think I superimposed my picture on this book to get by you? I mean, I got to go by security to see if I got any weapons. You're just trying to check if I'm the same guy, you know? And, man, he was angry, you know? He was a bureaucrat, so I said, man, I better change my strategy. So I sucked up. I went, oh, my God, it's such a difficult job you have making these kind of decisions, you know? And so he finally let me through, you know? But if I hadn't changed my style, I'm dead, you know? And but that's what you see, you know? And when you set up servant leadership, then what? People are empowered. People can do things. Now, I'm going to give you one last example. I'm going to give you a government example, because most people think, oh, man, if you can put it off in the government. Well, the worst situation I've ever had with the government over the years, I don't know about you, is going to the Department of Motor Vehicles. Have you ever experienced that? I always thought they hired human beings that hated other people. And, you know, they just beat you up in a really systematic way. And we live near Mexico, and the way they treat our good Mexican-American friends is just really amazing. Now, of course, you all know in California, we don't have to go there all the time. I don't know, what is it, every 10, 12 years you might have to take your written test. So, man, I kept away from there like the plague. But I have problems forgetting things, but I lost my license, see. And I'm going on a big trip to Europe in 2 weeks, so I thought I better have a license to back up my passport, you know, because you never know what'll happen. And so I said to my secretary at that time, Dana, and I said, could you schedule at least 3 hours next week at the Department of Motor Vehicles? Because that's about how long it takes them to beat you up. And so I went over there, and I walked in the front door, and I knew something had happened. Because this woman charged me, and she said, welcome to the Department of Motor Vehicles. Do you speak English or Spanish? I said English. She said, right over there. The guy behind the desk said, welcome to the Department of Motor Vehicles. How may I help you? It took me 9 minutes to renew my license, including taking my picture. So I said to this woman taking my picture, what are you all smoking here? You know, I mean, this isn't the department I used to know and love. And she said, haven't you met the new director? It's always a leader. It's always a leader. It's always a leader. And I said, where is this new director? And they had these, you know, kind of shelves or not, you know, whatever, counters in the front and then counters going down the side. They welcomed you here. You took your pictures down here. Out behind the counters, no privacy and all, is the desk. She said, there's the new director. No private office, no nothing. So I went out to meet this guy. And I said, what's your job as the director of the Department of Motor Vehicles? Write this down or put it on your forehead. It's a wonderful definition of a manager. He said, my job is to reorganize the department on a moment-to-moment basis depending on citizen need. You know what he had done? He had cross-trained everybody in everybody's job, so everybody could take pictures, everybody could run the front desk, including secretaries and bookkeepers in the back of the house, who, if there was a run-on by citizens, he said, that's not mission critical, get out here, the citizens out here. Nobody could go to lunch between 11:30 and 2. Why? That's when the citizens are free, see? And so this guy is really amazing. Now, just to show you how amazing it is, shortly after this, my secretary turned 50, and she decided that she was going to get one of those mopeds or one of those scooter deals, and she's going to bop around Southern California. See? So she gets this beauty, and she never even thought about a license. You know, she thought car license, you know, moped, you know. No, you got to get a license. So she goes over to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and she gives her name to this woman behind the counter. And she said, and she looks at it, and Dana had never had a ticket in her life. Not one mark on her whole license. And this woman says, that's incredible, your record. And she said, I'm looking at it, though. In 3 months, you're supposed to come back to take your written driver's license again. Why don't you take both tests today? Dana said, tests? I didn't know I was supposed to take a test. And she's panicked. I don't know if they were teaching these people human relations, but this woman reached across the counter, patted her hand. Oh, Dana, with your driving record, I'm sure you can pass this test. And besides, if you don't, you can always come back. So I want to tell you, one of the interesting things, before I tell you what happened, is I recognized some of the people in this place, and they were people who used to beat citizens up. And now they're cheering them on. What do you think the difference is? Leadership, you know, vision, values, and all. So Dana goes over and takes the test, brings it back to this woman. She falls one correct answer short of passing both tests. So officially she fails. This woman says, oh, Dana, you are so close to passing. She said, let me try something. I'm going to re-ask you one of the questions you got wrong on each of the tests to see if upon thinking about it you can get it right. Now, isn't that amazing? But what's really amazing is there's only 2 answers to each question. She said, Dana, you chose B on this question. What do you think would be the right answer? A, you pass, you know. And so I was telling this story one time, and at the break, a bureaucrat came up. And you can always spot the bureaucrats. They have really tight underwear on, you know, and they walk a little bit like this, you know. And this guy came, he says, why are you telling that story? That woman was breaking the law. Your secretary failed, you know. And so I went back to see my new friend. And I told him the story. And he said, Ken, let me tell you one other thing. When push comes to shove around decision-making, I want my people to use their judgment before rules, regulations, or laws. He said, the judgment of my person was, your secretary had a perfect driving record. And she didn't feel that was fair to that kind of citizen for one missed thing to bring him back. He said, I guarantee if your secretary missed 3, 4, 5 questions, she wouldn't have given him the same. But in her judgment, that was the right thing to do. And he said, I would defend her decision with my job. Would you like to work for a guy like that? You see the whole concept? And when you get your people passionate, we did a study of this. What's the relationship between strategic leadership, operational leadership, employee passion, and customer loyalty and organizational success? You know where the biggest impact on organizational success comes from? Operational leadership. From turning the... Not that the strategic is important because you need it, but the point is your people and your customers, they don't know what your strategy is. They don't know what the initiatives are. They don't know what the values are necessarily. All they know is how they're treated. And if your people are treated by an organization that turns the pyramid upside down and drives leadership throughout the organization, empowers people, they get passionate about their work. They get excited about serving customers. And that's what the change in these people at the Department of Motor Vehicles was. It was just incredible to see. And when they do that, what do? They go out of their way to take care of customers. And what happens to customers? They get to be loyal. They can't believe it. And they start bragging on these people, which reinforces them again and makes them even more. And they create what we call raving fan customers. What's a raving fan customer? A customer that is so crazy about the way you treat them, they want to brag about you. They become part of your sales force and all. And that is so powerful, you know. It beats advertising every single time. Because if you create raving fan customers, they're out there and they're talking about you and they're bragging on you and all that kind of thing. And so my feeling is that if you're a bearer of hope and you're constantly saying to people, hey, together we can do this. You know, I mean, this is tough, but we'll make it. You know, let's not get down. We pull through other things together. We can do it and all. And you get them going and they get their shoulders back and, man, let's go get it and all that kind of thing. You really can be amazed at the kind of things you can do. And then that combined with treating them as your business partners, that they can bring their brains to work, that they really ought to be involved in decision-making and share information with them so they know what's going on. And then you combine that with servant leadership that says, yes, the strategic leadership and direction and vision is really important, but where the real action is around operational leadership and implementation. And that's when we turn the pyramid upside down. That's where we do the thing. And just to end my talk, and then we'll have some questions, is that one of my big goals as I travel around the world is the reason we can't get more people to buy into servant leadership is that they're self-serving. And the reason they're self-serving, they think that who they are is a function of how much money they make, the recognition they get for their efforts, and the power and status they have in their position. Let me tell you, there's nothing wrong with making good money. There's nothing wrong with getting recognized for ethics. There's nothing wrong with getting some power status. What's wrong is when you think that's who you are. Because what do? Your scorekeeping is there. How do we get these people already making millions of dollars that want more? I mean, that's so absurd. How much money do you need? How many houses do you need? And all that kind of thing. Why? It's their scorekeeping. Because their self-worth is attached to their performance plus the opinion of others. And they miss significance in life. And servant leaders understand significance. What's the opposite of making money? It's generosity. When we're talking about generosity, what are we talking about? We're talking about not only your generosity of your treasure, your money, but we're talking about your time, your talent, and I like to add a fourth, your touch, reaching out to people. What's the opposite of recognition? I think it's service. You know, how can I help? Is there anything I can do? And then what's the opposite of power and status? It's loving relationships. John Ortberg, who's a great pastor and friend, just came out with a wonderful book you ought to get called At the End of the Game, It All Goes Back in the Box. And it's a story about John and his grandmother when he was young. She was a vicious Monopoly player. Any of you ever play Monopoly? He said when she played Monopoly, she acted like she was the illegitimate child of an affair between Donald Trump and Martha Stewart, you know. And at the end of the game, she had everything and he had nothing. And she would get this great grin on her face and she'd say, John, someday you're going to learn how to play the game. One summer when John was 12 or 13, this kid moved next door who was an incredible Monopoly player. He practiced with his kid every day that summer because he knew his grandma was coming in September. And when Grandma came, he ran into the house, gave her a big hug and a kiss, and he said, Grandma, how about a Monopoly game? And her eyes lit up, and she said, let's go, John. But he was ready for her this time. And he came out of the chute, and he wiped his grandmother out. At the end, he had everything. She had nothing. He said it was the greatest day of his life. And his grandmother smiled and said, John, now you know how to play the game. Let me teach you a lesson about life. It all goes back in the box. He said, what? Everything you bought, everything you accumulate, all goes back in the box. And people don't get it, that you can push and shove in life for money. You can push and shove for recognition and power. Baby, when you die, it all goes back in the box. The only thing you get to save is your soul. And that's where you store who you loved and who loved you. I love the ending of Ghosts, which is getting a big play because Patrick Swayze just died recently. But remember that film? It's a story about a financial advisor who gets killed by a supposed friend. He gets to stay on Earth as a ghost to defend his girlfriend, Molly, played by Demi Moore. He gets to talk to her through this wonderful character that Whoopi Goldberg plays, kind of a clairvoyant type, you know, by the name of Oda Mae. And at the end of the film, he's avenged his death. And the three of them are on the rooftop of Molly's apartment. And all of a sudden, this white light comes to get him. And Oda Mae says, they're coming for you, Sam. And he turns to Oda Mae and he says, your mama would have been proud of you. And then he goes and stands in front of Molly. If you saw the movie, he never told Molly he loved her. Molly would say, I love you, Sam. And what would Sam say? Ditto. And now with tears coming down his eyes, he says, Molly, I love you. I've always loved you. And Molly's crying and she says, ditto. And then he goes to face the light. And he stops one last time and he turns to Molly. He says, Molly, the incredible thing about this is you can take the love with you. And that's all you're going to take out of this world. You know, somebody asked my wife Margie recently, you know, what is leadership all about? She said, leadership is love. It's not about love. It's loving your mission. It's loving your customers. It's loving your people. And get this, it's loving yourself enough to get out of the way so other people can be magnificent. And I think if we really do that, I don't care if it's hard times, we can make it together. So God bless.
Well, I think we can all now understand why Ken has sold 18 million books. We need a little bit more love in this world. You persuaded me of everything, Ken, except why there's not more love to go around. Why aren't more people inspired by the manager at the Registry of Motor Vehicles or Southwest Airlines? Why Southwest the exception? Why is it so extraordinary that your secretary was treated like a human being and encouraged to succeed?
Well, one of the things I've found is that the biggest addiction in the world is the human ego, which stands for edging God out, and somehow thinking you're the center of the universe. And we edge God out in two ways. One is false pride, where we think more of ourselves than we should. We come from a more than philosophy, and we're pushing and shoving for credit. And the other is fear or self-doubt, when you think less of yourself. You're coming from a less than thing, and now what you're doing is you're protecting yourself. And the minute you come from a more than or a less than, you're always, what? Judging, you're always separating, you know, you're always distorting things. And we've started a, 12-step Egos Anonymous program because all of the great addictions are a result of fear and self-doubt, that they need something external to make me feel important. And a lot of people don't deal with the false pride and the stuff that we've seen in some of these leaders, you know. I mean, I talked to people from the big car companies, and they said those leaders wouldn't even thought that they should maybe not fly a private plane to Washington to ask for billions of dollars. I mean, they just wouldn't even have thought about it. Now, duh, why were they in trouble? You know, and so I think that's the biggest thing. And what we need to do is to recognize that our ego does get to us. You'd love these meetings, you know. We have people stand up behind a...
Yeah, my name's Ira.
Yeah. And, you know, first they can volunteer because, you know, you can't force somebody to be in an AA meeting. And we say if your ego's never gotten in your way, and either false pride where you felt badly because somebody forgot what you did, or you have self-doubt, you're afraid to give feedback because what will happen to you, you can leave. Nobody's left. And then we stand up and see, hi, Ira. What will we say? Hi, Ira. Then you have to say, I'm an egomaniac, and share the last time his ego got in the way. And it's a really powerful thing, because that's the thing that this kills us, is we somehow put ourselves in the center of the universe. The anecdote for false pride is humility, you know, and Jim Collins talked about in Good to Great. You know, people with humility don't think less of themselves; they just think about themselves less. And the false pride, I mean, the anecdote for self-doubt and fear is unconditional love. How many of you have kids? How many of you love your kids? How many of you only love your kids if they're successful, if they are good athletes or good students, you know? No, you love your kids unconditionally. What if you accepted that unconditional love for yourself? What if you realized God didn't make any junk and you could not perform well enough or be thought well enough to get any more love? You got all the love there are. You'd maybe look at the world a little differently rather than keeping score on your performance plus the opinion of others.
Who'd like to ask the next question, please? Or comment? Yep. Great. Yeah, I think we can probably hear you.
Southwest seems to get it again on their latest ad when you're talking about their bags.
Yeah.
And they're crying, my bags, they're gone. Again, serve an attitude.
That's right. Yeah, it's just amazing. And you look at the companies that just kill the competition, they all get it. Like Chick-fil-A, you know, every time you see anything in the fast food industry, they're number one. They got less than 2% turnover and 1,400 restaurant managers, you know, from 1,400 restaurants. Their hourly, you know, turnover is 75 to 100% less than anybody in the industry, you know. First time I spoke to all the managers of Chick-fil-A, the president stood up and said to all these people, if you're going to err with our people, please err on the side of mercy. And I said, do you all realize the company you work for? You know, next time I spoke, I had to follow Michael W. Smith in the Chick-fil-A choir, you know. And you know, you look at that. You look at Synovus, you know, chosen the #1 company. Fortune finally said, stop applying for the best company to work for, because they created an all-star list completely based on servant leadership. It's just Ritz-Carlton, based on servant leadership. Horst Schulze, who started the whole thing. It just can name company after company that just kills the competition. And why people don't want to get it, and it's the human ego that keeps them from, and the, you know, all those kinds of things.
Who's next, please? Stand up, thank you.
Well, I wrote a book called The 1 Minute Apology. And so you might start off by saying, you know, I couldn't sleep the other night, you know, because I suddenly got this position. And I was just thinking about, you know, what I could do differently that could make a difference. And I want to apologize for anybody that I might have, you know, led in a different way. But this is where we're going. And people ask me, how do you turn a self-serving leader into a servant leader? There's only 3 ways I know. One is a near-death experience. That's very helpful. You know, people almost die. They look at the world very differently. Second is a spiritual awakening, and I've seen that happen to people. And the third is a significant role model. And so you just look at, you know, it's maybe getting up to that position. All of a sudden they get a chance to interact with some people and start to look at best practices and start to realize maybe there's a better way to do this and all. But so often leaders don't want to act like they're vulnerable, like they maybe made mistakes in the past and all. I think that that's one of the ways to build your image and your people, because they all know that you're not perfect. And the quicker you admit it, the better. And I think that's, and yet you just don't get anybody who wants to do that, you know. They all want to cover up. I mean, I wrote the 1-minute apology after the whole Clinton thing, you know, with Monica Lewinsky. If he had just gotten up in front of the country and said, can you imagine what a jerk I am? Here's the President of the United States carrying on in the Oval Office. You know, I apologize. I just, you know, hope that somehow you'll be able to forgive me. The whole country would have said, all right, Billy, stop it. You know, and we would have gone on, we could have run the country rather than sitting around there trying to prove something, you know. Good apology is probably one of the best things you can learn.
Mr. Blanchard, your 3 routes to teaching how to be a servant leader suggests to me to be a little cantankerous at this point. There's not very much of a role for business schools, for B schools. That's not a part of the curriculum, I don't think. So how do you see the role of business schools, management schools?
I tell you that I was including them, and I appreciate you bringing that up in the role model. I want to tell you, one of the biggest thrills I have, my title is I'm the Chief Spiritual Officer in our company. I leave a morning message for everybody in our company, and I do 3 things. First, I tell them who to pray for, because people tell me who's hurting and all that kind of thing. Then I praise people, and then I leave them. And one of the most powerful things, when all those Harvard MBAs signed that code of ethics, and I wanted to say, wow, now we're starting to cook, you know. And I think that if business schools really started to teach servant leadership as the only way to lead, and it's not soft management, it's the only way to do it, and they don't have to go with the faith-based stuff. You can go with Greenleaf stuff or other people. I think we can really make a difference, and I'm really optimistic. We're involved in 2 master's degree programs, one at the University of San Diego, and it's a Master of Science in Executive Leadership, and then at Grand Canyon University we have an Executive MBA. And what we do is we intersperse the program with the basic business acronyms that you normally get in an MBA program. But we start off with self-leadership. The first thing is for people to look at themselves. You know, what's my mission in life? What are my values? You know, what's my leadership point of view and all? I think a lot of people have never taken a good look at themselves. Then we move to one-on-one leadership, which is now about building trust. And once you can lead another individual, then you can go to team leadership, and we move to that. And that's about building a community. None of us is as smart as all of us. And then we end with organizational leadership, which is, you know, how do you run an organization, which is a bunch of departments and teams and all, with both results and people. And we intersperse that throughout the program. And it's a really powerful kind of thing. And I think a lot of people are saying we come away from this differently. And I think it's because, you know, we're modeling different kinds of things, and I think that's what we need to look at our curriculum. I'm so pleased. You know, a decade ago, you couldn't have found an ethics course probably in most business schools, and boy, they're there now, and they're really powerful. And I think we could really take a look. I think we've been spending too much time training business consultants and financial analysts, and I have nothing against those fields. But we need some leaders. Well, it's a real joy to be with you, and hope some of the thoughts I share might be helpful. Let me just end with one story. I became a big fan of the Special Olympics over the years, and one of my favorite stories, they even made an ad over it, in Spokane, Washington, a number of years ago. In the 100-yard dash, they had 9 contestants in the male 100-yard dash, and they were all down the starting blocks with like the regular Olympics, and the guy with a gun, bang, it goes off. And these 9 young people just race out of there as fast as they can, given their handicap or disability. And about a third of the way down the track, one of the kids tripped and fell. And he tried to get up, and he fell again. And he just lied in the track, and he just sobbed and cried loudly. 2 of his opponents heard him crying and stopped where they were and turned around and headed back towards him. The other 6 people raced for the gold. And these 2 young people helped this young guy up, and the 3 of them held hands and walked across the finish line together. And the crowd initially didn't know how to compute this. I mean, it was beyond their belief. And then when they finally got it, they stood up and they gave him a 10-minute standing ovation. And let me just say that you can make the world a better place. People say, do you want to make the world a better place? Yeah. What do you do? And everybody laughs. You can make the world a better place by the moment-to-moment decisions you make as you interact with other human beings. You know, if somebody yells at you in the morning as you leave the house, you can either yell back or go back and give them a hug and tell them, hope your day is better. Somebody cuts you off, you can, you know, give them the finger or send them a prayer. You know, you got all kinds of choices on that, and the choice is always is, am I going to come from a servant heart or a self-serving heart? Are you here to serve or be served? And I think that's what